Yes. You're gonna have. You know, you're gonna have. All right, attention everyone. Got the phone in y'all seat. We're gonna get it going. What's my name? Thumbs up. We ready? We live on Zoom. All right, Max. Thank you. Thank you. All right, everyone. Grab a seat. Grab y'all something to drink, a snack, refreshments you have for y'all. James, would you like to go first, or you want me to go first?
Man, I'll go first.
Go ahead, brother. I'll let you go.
All right, you guys, thank you so much for you guys, being here tonight and, joining us. My name is Jason Malabute. I started off just like most of you guys, back in 2018. I knew absolutely nothing about real estate investing. 2019, I started buying properties out of state, out in Indianapolis. I made so many mistakes, you guys. And then in 2020, I decided that I wanted to transition from single family to multi-family for about 3 years. I could not find a deal, and I felt very discouraged. And now I'm a general partner in a 106 deal. I'm telling you guys this because I wanna motivate you guys that I don't never give up on you guys' dreams. All right.
All right, thank you, Jason. I'm not as long-winded as he is. My name is Dexter Harris from South Central Los Angeles. My company is D Harris Group. We invest in San Antonio and Houston, anywhere from 24 up to 100 plus units. I worked in a special education field with special needs children for 11 years. District employee. I have a vending machine company, scaled it up to multiple locations. I'm currently a passive investor on 456 units. And as Jason, I will be closing on my first deal sometime this year too. I'm claiming it. Guest speaker, Jaime. I'm not gonna steal the thunder. You ready, brother? Hey, all right, ladies and gentlemen. Jaime, you got it, brother.
Dexter, a couple of months back, these guys invited me to come and talk to you guys. Funny story, Jorge, one of my business partners, he and I used to run the multifamily investors West LA chapter.
Oh,
right before COVID, and then that dashed our dreams. And so we weren't able to do any formal meetups afterwards. But it's been turned over to better hands in this space. But I'm so glad to be here. Dexter and Jason asked that I present on real estate development. A lot of people who know me, I've been in the development space for a long, long time. And they've been asking for me to kind of put together a crash course on real estate development, what it is, how to get started. And I've kind of taken all my years of experience and put together a presentation that hopefully flows in a way in which it makes sense. So start off with kind of this initial slide. This is one of the projects I'm working on. You see this rendering here. It's a big student housing project I'm working on next to USC for a very, very well-known client there. Got insane amenities, rooftop pool, fire pits, big study lounge areas. And so I didn't get to this stage, overnight. It took years and years of knowing about the real estate development space to be able to make something like this become a reality. We're 3 months into construction, and we'll be delivering this project in June of 2025, right before the school year. This type of project is going to be inhabited by students who are in a very well positioned to take on a building of this size with these amazing views of downtown LA and the USC project. So happy to be part of a project of this scale. Let's see how it works.
There you go.
There we go. So myself, I've been in real estate development for over 15 plus years. I started very, very young. When I was in undergrad, I went to Cal Poly San Obispo, and I really used that experience, that opportunity to really learn about real estate development. I come from a very humble background, grew up in Echo Park, low income. And so for me to be able to kind of really learn about kind of the corporate structure, the corporate world, and kind of understand things, I just got to work really young. And so I started doing some summer internships here back in LA, worked for some of the big builders in LA, such as Panko Builders, Clark Construction, and worked on some really cool, unique projects to start off. And that's how I started kind of getting into the field of real estate, kind of through construction. So some of the people I used to work with have been Panko Builders, Clark Construction. I decided that I didn't want to do construction for a long, long time because I realized that it was going to take a long time to kind of move up that corporate ladder. I kind of want to know how I can accelerate my experience. And so I ended up going back to school, went to UCLA to get my MBA. And that's how I made that transition from construction into finance and ultimately real estate development. But I've been involved in previous partnerships before. Started partnerships over the years. I'm currently in a few partnerships that allow me to really scale the business. And so over the years, I've been involved in over $1 billion of projects here in LA only. And just being from LA and understanding LA, and I've gone out to Texas, I've gone out even internationally, and I just don't see a better market where being here, understanding the different zoning and understanding the code and the processes and the relationships that I've built, I just don't see a better community where I can continue cultivating new opportunities. So I started a couple companies. One of them is Oakwood Development Group. That's that student housing project that I've been working on. The clients there saw, I guess, the potential that I was kind of trajectory over the years. They recognized me when I graduated undergrad, and I was just kind of learning the industry. And then over time, they were like, oh, well, you really know how to take on these projects. Well, we want to just hire you to take on our project. And that's how that organization was built. And that's a $55 million, student housing project that we're delivering here in a couple of years. And now I'm involved in quite a few projects that have a couple of business partners here that have been allowed us to scale and get to a point where we have 5 active projects, 31 units across city of LA in these really high urban markets. So I'm really excited about the opportunity here. Let's see here. So here are my previous projects that I worked on over the years. The ones up there are 2 schools that I built for a charter school developer. One was called KIP over in East LA. The other one's Valor Academy High School. That one's in North Hills area. Did those projects from beginning to end. The operator bought the land. We designed it, entitled it, had to go to public hearings. I presented in front of the city council about the project and ultimately got it approved, constructed it, and delivered it to the school. Very early in my career, I worked in La Cañada Flinters Town Center when I was, very young, working on that project. Chapman Plaza is another big redevelopment project I did for in my investment banking days, redeveloping that and retenanting that project. But the one that really kind of put me on the map, so to speak, was Angel's Landing. It's not built yet, and obviously you've never seen that project yet. But as a couple of years ago, when I joined an investment group, we were going after that site. And so that's considered Cal Plaza 3. There's Cal Plaza 1, Cal Plaza 2, and Cal Plaza 3. Cal Plaza 1 and 2 have been built. You have 2 big high rises there. One of them says ACOM. I think the other one says, I don't know which other building it says, but this is supposed to be Cal Plaza 3. And so we went through a request for proposal process with these development partners that I joined, and we were able to go ahead and win that site. And so it was just us putting together the presentation, So I'm used to kind of putting presentations like this in front of either city council or in front of investors and be able to win that site. And we beat out some of the biggest developers in the nation, guys like Trammell Crow, guys like Related Groups, guys like CIM Group. And we were able to come in and present a feasible, great project that benefited the community. And that's how we won that project. These types of projects take, 10 years to develop. And one of the partners there was like, man, you have a lot of potential. What do you, this project's going to eat you for 10 years. You should be out there really pursuing other opportunities and really build a name for yourself. And so that kind of allowed me to then move out of that project. I got it to a point where we got it entitled, went through the CEQA process with the state to get that project entitled, but then I exited that project. So that project's right now currently like design, things like that before it officially gets built.
Where is that?
That's where Angel's Landing is. There's like a train that moves up and down the hill. There's the
downtown, right?
downtown LA.
Downtown.
Yeah. The what's that market called? Grand Central Market. So across from Grand Central Market, that big park, that's what's slated to be built there.
Thank you.
So moving on. So now going from that, that was my corporate experience, and that's what I always try to differentiate, right? Is I have this corporate background where I just was moving up the ladder to gain a lot of experience. But at the end of the day, it's not your money, right? Somebody else's money putting it down. It was my W-2 income. That's the way I made my living. But I took that money and I reinvested it to my projects. And I started very, very similar to a lot of the people here, right? I started with a flip, just like most folks. And from there, I just kind of continued pushing the envelope. So it started with a flip, then it was this addition, then it was an ADU, then it was a ground up ADU, and then it was a multifamily project. And so it was constantly pushing the envelope to get to a position where now I was deploying my own capital to take on larger and larger deals. And so, like I said, that student housing project is going to be called Tessera for the students. Again, that's a project that I was hired exclusively to develop that for my clients. And then these other ones are the ones that we've put in our serious money and our investor money to be able to do. Victoria Park, the one down here, that one's getting built. That we're going to start construction in 2 weeks. So we've got our RTI, our permits to be able to construct that one. That one's a triplex in Mid-City. We got Crenshaw, that's a 6-unit, also in Mid-City. We're currently through the design permitting process to get that one approved. We got Aaron, which is where we recently had a meetup. That's a 5-unit that we're building in Echo Park. And then this one's kind of, dear to me. That's Coronado. And so that's actually where I grew up. So I grew up in Echo Park, and we're taking the single family where I used to grow up. And I was able to convince my dad to tear it all down and build 5 units. So, but that won't be until sometime next year. I got to figure out a temporary housing situation. So those are the projects that I'm working on. But you guys are all here to kind of learn a little bit of what this looks like. And so what I kind of put together was kind of the process of what the development process looks like. And one of it has to do with the development life cycle. So developers get rewarded based on the amount of risks they take. And so usually you go into a project, you see the vision, but now you got to execute the whole way through in order to get paid out, right? And so that's why the highest risk is on the acquisition, because you have to go through this enormous process to get these projects approved, get them construct them, get them financed, and ultimately get them delivered. And so that's why the highest risk is always on the acquisition. Once you get down to like the end, that's the lowest risk. And that's where, the payouts correspond to that. So the acquisition phase, for those of us who've already, our property is not any different. It's just going through escrow, taking title, buying the property. Really where the majority of the work is that, in the development space is in the due diligence and the entitlement design. The due diligence is where you need to hire a bunch of consultants to basically, look at the feasibility of this project. So it's hiring architects, engineers, hiring different consultants to analyze the soil. You sometimes hire a consultant analyzes methane in the soil. So there's a ton of different things that go into a project to make sure that it's feasible, that you can build it, and then you can proceed. And so this is where I spend the majority of my time in most of my projects. So I'm kind of quarterbacking all those projects that I mentioned in this phase, right, which is due diligence, entitlement design. And so entitlement design is just literally designing the project, going through the city, doing this back and forth, parade, and actually ultimately getting your project approved. So it's a very kind of intensive process that you normally don't see in like the multifamily space when it comes to, you go through your due diligence, right? Which is very, involved, but this design component is what's a completely different piece when it comes to development. And ultimately, the biggest milestone everyone's trying to get is your permits. It's called RTI, Ready to Issue Permits, where you ultimately have a piece of paper that says that I am allowed to build this project, right? Construction is the next big component of development, right? And so that just varies on timeline. But honestly, by the time you get there, that part's downhill. Most people see the construction as the most riskiest. Honestly, that's kind of the lowest risk for the developers, because the project's designed, it's approved, and went through this massive amount of headaches to get your project ultimately approved. And so for those of you who've done ADUs or flips and have to go to the city, right? Once you have your permits, it's pretty much straightforward. The problem with those types of projects, right? You uncover stuff behind the walls that you didn't even account for, right? With new development, there's nothing to account for. It's whatever the plan shows, and that's it. So that's why the risk is the least amount. Is just now managing the contractor, make sure they're staying on top of their timelines. And then finally, you get your certificate of occupancy. That is again, another piece of paper you need to ultimately occupy the building. That's what allows you to start, actually transfer the project to a potential seller, for a renter to come in to actually lease the space. And so that's the biggest milestone that you need to hit. And then obviously the sale and market, that's very traditional in any other deal when it comes to marketing. Yes.
Before, when you do the acquisitions, wouldn't it be ideal to do the due diligence before you're into escrow, so you basically have most of your ducks like checked out during the escrow process, so you
Correct.
know what to foresee into the development stages? Like, what do you
Yeah, exactly. So the way I drafted it here, it kind of looks like a second step. It can be, but usually it's a combined step with acquisition. So as soon as we lock down the deal and put it under escrow, right, that's when you start getting to work, right? It's just like, all right, but you also got to minimize how much money you spend too, right? You don't want to do this entire due diligence
because feasibility costs
because the feasibility cost is so expensive. What if you're like, man, this is, you could spend thousands of dollars in escrow, and at the end of the day, you'd be like, this deal doesn't work. And then you just, wasted 10, 20 grand, So it's almost like a fine line of knowing.
You get money on the acquisition, that's so you can account for those.
Right, exactly. On the bigger deals, yes, it's a longer acquisition process that allows you to do a lot of that due diligence. So when it comes to development, we always talk about entitlements. And so for some people, they don't really understand register what that means. People just throw that word around, but it basically means it's just a bundle of rights. You have the right to build this property. You have the right to occupy this property. And so it's basically called a bundle of rights. And usually as developers, we either do something that's by right, which allows you to do whatever the code allows you to do day one. You don't have to go through some crazy process or some of the other stuff that I had to do with going to the city and pleading our case as to why our project needs to get built. Like, you just literally go to the city, get your plans approved, and then you can start constructing. Or you can go through the big process, which is called an entitlement, which is actually granting your project. And so it just depends the level of, work you want to get involved to get these projects ultimately approved. Two of the other things that you need to know between land use and zoning. The way I learned it is land use is very general. It's just like it allows you to build residential, allows you to build retail, allows you to build industrial, allows you to build a parking structure. That's land use. It's a very general use of what exactly that piece of land could be used for. Now, zoning that's where you get very specific as to what that piece of property can be built, right? So now you're looking at how tall can it be? How, you know, what's the setbacks between the two buildings? Or how much parking requirements? So, you know, that's where they really get into the details of the specifics of that property. And so that's something you always need to be conscious of, is when you're looking at these opportunities, is looking at the land use, what can I build here? And secondly, what exactly, how am I gonna build it? And so, and the reason they you know, the cities all across the US do this is to prevent, you know, big mix mishmash of projects, you know, in a neighborhood, right? You don't want an industrial facility next to your house, or, you know, you don't want, in my cases, when I work in this charter school world, you don't want a school next to your property, but, you know, that's why we have to go through a process in order to be able to get these projects approved. So that's the reason cities implement these types of ordinances, to prevent kind of the defragmentation of the neighborhoods in which they serve. So that's how they try to keep developers in check. When it comes to development, we always talk about this phrase. It's called highest and best use. Highest and best use, we always talk about it, right? Is this the highest and best use of this site? And what that really means is really, is basically what it kind of says, but I just want to be more specific. Highest means density. It's like, what is the maximum that I can get out of this site in order to be able to maximize the opportunity here, right? Best use is what's the best product to develop. So highest can be more analytical. It's just doing the math calculations of how many units, how much square footage. But best use is where you switch from analytical to more marketing, to more the art of development, which is, well, what is the best product to develop? Is it an apartment building? Is it a hotel? Is it some retail center? You know, that's where you need to start getting into more of the specifics of the market. What are you trying to serve? What type of clients are going to be utilizing that project? And so when you combine the two together, that's how you determine the best product to build on a specific site, is just what is the highest and best use. In my case, I've always dealt in multifamily. And so for me, highest and best use has always meant, what type of building can I build here that increases the maximum number of units, right? So that's my highest and best use. I mainly operate in only city of LA, and I have a lot of reasons for that. But for me, it's always been easier to work with city of LA once I understand the zoning and the land use. Like now that I got it down, like it's just repetition. I don't have to go to, you know, La Brea or some other city, right? Where I have to like really learn kind of how the process works. Like with City of LA, just because I've done it so many times, I have a process and I know what to expect, which only minimizes my risk. But in City of LA, we, just like many other cities, they use some kind of software system that gives you an idea of what the zoning looks like. In City of LA, we use a system called ZMIS. And so you just go online, you plug in ZMIS, you can literally put any address on ZMIS and it'll tell you all the data you need to know about that piece of property. And so if you go on here, you know, this is a really great slide because there's a lot that I can teach you here in terms of what this all means. But the ones in yellow, you see how they reference R1, right? R1. R1, remember I mentioned land use versus zoning, right? Land use is generally what you can build there. R1 means single family. You can only build single family there. And then the one itself, or the HPOZ, you know, we won't get into all the designations, but that's the zoning, right? That's the specific things that you need to know about that piece of property that limits how big a single family can it be? Can it be 3 stories? Can it be 1 story, right? That's where you need to actually do a lot more research. But generally, you see the ones in yellow, they say R1. You see the ones in orange, they say R3. That's multifamily. That means you can build multifamily in those lots. And so a lot of people, you know, you just buy a house, you have no idea what your house is zoned because you could be literally sitting on a gold mine, just like my parents, right? They didn't know. They didn't know they're buying an RD 1.5 or RD2 lot. I was like, oh, it wasn't until I went through this entire process 30 years later that I was like, oh, wow, well, we're actually sitting on a really nice piece of property. And so those skill sets came in handy. And so that's R3. The ones in peak say C2, that means commercial. And so commercial, you usually see those on big boulevards, big avenues, things like that. And that's a reason that comes from city planning, understanding how our cities need to work. And then you see this green one here. I think that's PF. It has to do with like a public building. I know that's a library. So that's how they designate specific areas for specific things. And so that's why I pulled up this slide, because it just tells you everything you know about land use and zoning, and how when you look at a map, and I've taught people how to do this, it's like, look at a map, look at this, do this, and it'll tell you what you actually can build there. Like a very quick cheat sheet about how land use and zoning works, specifically here in LA.
Are those codes apply only to the city of LA, or is the same?
They take a lot of the same hybrid model in other cities, right? And so generally R1 means single family. And so, but different cities do different designations based on what they're ultimately trying to achieve, right? But I think City of LA does a pretty good job of generally having a full set of designations and zoning to understand how most other cities work. So yeah, that's zoning and land use, basically right there in a nutshell. That's literally what I do every now and then when a deal comes to me, right? I just need to know the address. Just give me the address and how much you want for it. And then I do my research, and then that's like, oh man, it's too expensive or whatever, or you can't really do anything there. So I get a lot of agents that send me a lot of deals, and because they're not sophisticated enough to understand this stuff, I always have to kind of do that work up front to understand whether it's a good deal or not. And so moving on to the kind of next phase, right? So now you know that you can build a multifamily, but the next part to that, as part of my analysis, is how many units can I build there, right? So I just showed you some areas where it was multifamily that you can build there. Well, can I build 2 units? Can I build 10? Can I build 100, right? This is where it kind of goes into that next step of understanding the designations of the zoning. And so I pulled up the most common ones that you usually see here in City of LA. They're RD 1.5, RD 2, and all of this just kind of makes sense, you know, once you understand it. At first, it just looks like a bunch of letters and numbers, but there's actually a meaning behind it, right? RD 1.5 means you could build 1,500 square feet per unit of land. And you just go down the list. RD2, 2,000, RD3, 3,000, RD4, 4,000. Where it starts getting different is these lots that are R3, R4. That's a lot of Koreatown, other big boulevards. And so that's where it starts getting 800 square feet per unit, 400 square foot per unit. C2 is a big one. Usually you get those in boulevards. You can use R4 to build your lots there. And so as you can see, the better the designation, the more the density, right? Talked about highest and best use. What is my highest maximum use? I like lots that are, you know, RD4, R3, R4, because I can fit maximum units in that same lot, right? The R1s, you know, for me are pointless because I can only build a single family. But that same size lot, if it was R4, you could do 400 square feet per unit. And that for a developer, knowing that land is worth a ton of money, you know, because you have every right to build as many units there. So I took an example. This is one of the deals we're actually working on. The lot size 7657. Again, Zemas tells you all this information. It's zoned R3. And so my simple formula, this isn't anything crazy. It's just 7653 is my lot. My zoning is R3, which is 800 square feet per unit. You just divide 7657 divided by 800. You get 9.57 units. You can't build 0.57 units. You always got to round down City of LA. And so you get 9 units. And so that's zoning, you know, density in a nutshell. You know, for a lot of people, this is like really brand new stuff. This is actually very easy stuff once you understand how it all works. The bigger the lot, the more units you can build. The higher the density, the more units you can build in that same lot. So,
like this project, start to finish, like acquisition to sale, how long is the process is that?
It's as hard as you push the city, right? Or you push you grind your architects. to get it done. No, we try to get it done in like 20 months, so under 2 years from start to finish. The day we close to the day we potentially sell it, 20 months. That requires a lot of pushing everybody to get it done. Yes.
Are you always sure of being able to get a project entitled before you close?
Yeah, exactly. So most of the projects we work on are by right. And so we don't have to deal with this discretionary process with the city and presenting our project and why the community deserves our project. Like our project's already zoned for us to automatically get approvals. We don't have to do what's called a discretionary approval, where you got to present it from a neighborhood council and city council and this other stuff, you know.
Have you ever like experienced or known somebody who's like, you know, how to take a project that, you know, they have to actually get entitled and then they weren't able to do that? Like actually get entitled?
Yeah, I mean, there are cases where it happens. I mean, some of the mega projects get stalled. I don't know if you know, they were trying to build a big Target over on Sunset and yes, exactly.
I grew up that thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Forever. And they had a hype, you know, there was so many restrictions and they had to like cut it down or something.
Exactly.
Like
and
that.
then that's where they got a lot of neighborhood opposition to go against the project. And then the city council person said no. So the developer's money, I don't know how much they spent, a couple million. You know, that's it. So
they filed bankruptcy.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, they did not do well.
Right, exactly. So that I remember that being a specific case that shows where if you're trying to do discretionary approvals, if you don't know what you're doing or you get buy-in from the community, that's why a lot of developers are known to be, you know, very rub shoulders with politicians, is because you got to get ultimately your projects approved. So, what else? So developing and budgeting. So the other part to these projects, you know, we're going to get to schedule in a bit, but it has to do with budgeting, right? And so the way I like to do budgeting is just a couple buckets. Again, this isn't all that complex. It's just being able to understand the framework of how it all works. But just like any other project, there's acquisition costs. There's the cost to buy the property, right? So I gave you guys some numbers here. Hard cost is the cost to construct the property. The difference between hard and soft, I try to explain this to a lot of people, is hard is what's physically being installed on that property permanently, right? You're installing fencing permanently, you're installing wood, stucco, windows. So all those are hard costs. So this project, 1.5 million of hard costs, right? And so that's the actual physical material that goes into the project. Soft costs, while there's still costs for the project, they don't actually get installed on the property. They contribute to the project getting built, right? So architect fees, permit fees, inspections, your insurance, those are all considered soft costs because they don't actually go on the property, but they contribute to get the property getting built. So those are soft costs. The next big bucket is financing costs. Those are the cost to finance the project. You usually get a construction loan to be able to finance these types of projects. So that's where your interest and your loan fees all go in. And then you got management costs, you know, with these types of projects, they're very labor intensive for management to push these projects along. It's not like, you know, I'm just telling a GC, hey, how's it going? Whatever. It's like I'm actively quarterbacking as project manager to put these projects through, right? It's just talking to the architect, talk to the engineer, talk to my permit expediters, like, hey, where are we at? What clearances do we have with the city? It's a lot of intensive management work. And so we need to be subsidized to keep our lights on, pay our fees for our staff, our management, our different personnel to make sure that we keep the project active. Because these are projects that can take 2 years. So for 2 years, without making some level of compensation, you know, you can only do so many projects, you know, working for free. And then lastly, I include contingencies. With these types of projects, nothing's exact. This is always an art. Like I can tell you like, hey, I'm gonna go build this project and my hard costs are gonna be exactly 1.537, right? It's based on a framework that I understand based on experience of how much these projects are gonna cost. But there's always little things that come up and I always pull money from the contingency to cover those costs. So it's usually about 10% of the project. well, 10% of hard costs, but in this case, it's 3% of the overall project. So that's how you kind of come up with the final budget on this project. You can get very detailed, but it's a little more than for this presentation. But generally, those are your big buckets of costs when it comes to development. Now, when it comes to the sources, like where are you going to get the money from to pay for all these costs? Well, it's just really two sources: is you get a loan and you get equity. And so the construction loan component is talking to the lenders that are in the construction space that give you funds for these types of projects, and that's based on a lot of factors of why they're going to give you a loan. But in this one, you know, $2.5 million, they're able to go ahead and give you the funds to be able to proceed with these projects. And then the rest of it, you know how to come up on your own. That's where the equity comes in. And so, you know, for us to put in that much money on our own, that means we only do one project every 2 years, right? And so that's where we bring in investors. They come in, they provide you know, a sizable amount of the equity to allow us to do 5, 6, 7 projects at the same time, right? Next. And then finally, the financial summary. So this is where it's all worthwhile, right? And so 2 years of brain damage, 2 years of kind of, you know, figuring out what's going on with this project, getting nervous at every step of the way. Potentially your project gets stalled, right? And so, but no, in this case, we obviously have to make sure it's worthwhile. And so just like any project, you've got to base it on the comps of what new projects are selling for in the area. And so in this case, this specific project is selling north of 4 million. That's what the going rate for projects of this size are going for. Again, and that's why we only focus on multifamily. It's economies of scale, ability to produce more units, less risk when you have more units, more tenants, more buyers willing to buy multifamily. When you iron out all your expenses after going through escrow and closing and all this other stuff, you're left with your net, how much it costs you to build this project, right? You saw that number, that $3.3 million number. At the end of the day, we're looking at 6, 7 figure profits because it just requires so much work. There's so much that goes into it that if I'm going to be stuck in a project for 2 years, I got to make sure at the end of the day, there's a reward for it, right? And so when it comes to, I know part of the multifamily masters here is, you know, we're always looking at deals, apartment buildings, things like that. When it comes to development, the returns are just astronomical just because of the risk, right? And so when you buy an apartment building, it's an existing asset, it exists, there's already tenants, there's some cash flow, value add strategy, things like that, right? So there's the risk to reward is symmetrical to the amount of risk you're taking, right? These development teams, you're taking a ton of risk, so, you know, and so the reward needs to be compensated for it. And that's why you see these metrics being super high, right? Your ROI is like 25. Your IRR, which is a function of time, of how the way money works, you know, it's 80%, which is insane. And then your equity multiple is at that, you know, 2x. We always try to hit 2x. That this is from my days in working in development, you know, anything north of 25% IRR, 2x is a good development deal. And so that's just kind of a framework that we use. So the equity multiple, for most people, if you don't know what that means that for every dollar you put in, that's how much you get back, right? And so if I put $100, I get $196 back in this case, or 100,000, 196,000. And so that's what gives you a quick metric to figure out how big of a return you should be able to make. Yes.
Why would you decide to, or I mean, just curious, why do developers, I guess better way to phrase it, choose to raise equity on a project like this instead of like having private lenders at a specific interest rate, like 10% annualized or something like that?
It's using a combination of strategies, actually. And so we've actually experienced that with some of our deals. Private money lenders, again, they're assessing the risks of their money, right? It's like, hey, I'm gonna give you 100,000, but I don't know if it's gonna take 20 months or whatever, right? And so that's a lot of risk for them to take for the percentage they're getting. And so usually what we do is we offer equity to start because remember that development life cycle that I was showing you originally, if I go back, and that's why I put this here. People who come in at the beginning are taking the highest risk and they deserve the highest reward. And so that's why they deserve equity because they believed in this project, they believed in you as a developer, and you know, we need to compensate you accordingly for the risk you're taking. Private money usually comes in when their investment's a bit safer, and they usually come in right when you get RTIs. So all that work has been done already, and then they come in, it's like, oh, okay, it's only gonna take you a year to construct. Yeah, I can give you some private money. And usually that's the way we structure it. Like, you know, an investor that comes in and gets equity at RTIs, that would almost be unfair to the investor that came in early and believed in you from the beginning. And so at that point, they would get a lower return for coming to the project later, you know? And so again, we talked about sales comps. And so we don't just, they always say they have this build it and they will come, right? And so you use that strategy, you're gonna go bankrupt. And so you always got to base it on some kind of analysis. And so, you know, there's other developers building in certain areas. You use the comps of those areas to be able to determine, right, my strategy here works. Here in this case, they build a fourplex ADU, sold early this year, sold for 4.2. And so we're trying to exit 4.3. I think we'll get there with 6 units. That's not a problem. So again, based on the data of what's going on in that area. So that's why I know we're moving towards a goal that's attainable. And so lastly, kind of wrap up the presentation. This, again, I intended this to be a crash course. I can't go through every single permutation of the development process, but just some of the key considerations, right? The role of the developer, I always think of us as the entrepreneurs of the space, right? And so we're all the ones, you know, looking at a project, seeing the potential, what it could possibly be. And so we always create great places for people who, you know, work, live, play. In my case, mine's is in the live and place category, right? Is creating these great innovative spaces, these modern units that, you know, that you don't rent, you know, always see. I got that big student housing project. The amenities there are next level, you know? And so for us, is always taking those considerations to build something new that people enjoy, right? We're always anticipating future needs, right? And so right now, housing crisis, things going on, right? You know, us as developers have a responsibility to create more housing. And so for us, it's going through this amount of work, right? This 2-year process to be able to put more units on the map. And so we're always anticipating future needs of what ultimately happen in our areas. And like I said, we always pursue highest and best use. And so the smart growth strategy of pursuing what's the best that can happen on this site and take it through the process. Now, I know a lot of people have always, you know, enamorized the rules of the developer and things like that, but I put together some traits of what makes a really good developer. You know, it's very visionary, entrepreneurial driven. Like this is a lot of work. There's a lot of work. And so it requires someone who's willing to work, put in the effort, entrepreneurial, kind of bootstraps and kind of gets things done, right? And so there is no light days in any of this stuff that we're doing. So a lot of great project management skills, just being able to manage multiple staff, team members. You're not doing it on your own. You're relying on your architect. You're relying on your engineers. You're relying on the competent staff that can take the project from beginning to end. And so you need to be able to manage those consultants. Multiple industry focus. So you got to be able to, I don't know everything 100%, but I know enough to ask the right questions, right? And so whenever, I was earlier this week, I was in a shoring meeting. And so they were talking about shoring and it's all this other stuff about shoring. Shoring means you're holding up earth of a neighbor, right? Or your own site. And so they were getting very detailed, but at the end of the day, I had to drive the conversations like, ultimately, what decision do we need to make here? And so looking at cost, timeline, things like that. So again, it's not knowing everything, knowing a little bit of everything, a little bit of design, a little bit of engineering, just enough to ask questions and move the project. So that you have to be very multidisciplinary in order to be successful. And probably the last one, which is probably the most crucial one, has to do relationships, reputation, and track record. When it comes to track record, I'd say that's probably the most important. And that's why this growth for me hasn't been, hey, let me just build a high rise day one. It's been, like I said, I started off with a flip, moved my way up against, kind of pushing the envelope. And that came from, and the reason that is because you got to build track record over time. Investors and especially lenders, they do not like to lend on people who are doing this the first time. They want to be able to see that you've built a track record over time that can stand on and be like, oh, okay, I see that you're always pushing the envelope. I see that you're always, pushing these projects, willing to lend you money, willing to invest in this project and really invest in you. And so now it's up to you to make it a reality. So that's where a lot of that focus becomes. So your reputation is super important. The relationships you have with business partners, your consultants are super important. Nurturing those relationships and then building that track record slowly at a time, where people can confide in you and have that confidence to invest in you and believe in your deal. So those would be the biggest things that I would say for anybody who's wanting to get into this space is it takes time. I worked a lot for a lot of years to try to make it happen and be in a fortunate position where I'm in. So you can always follow me on Instagram. I try to be as active as possible on all my deals, everything that's going on. Feel free to email me if you have any other questions. For me, a lot of the opportunity comes from, they see all the work and everything that goes into it. And so we're always raising capital for all our deals. So for those of you who want to have kind of that side-by-side kind of view of what a day in the life is of a developer, we always have those opportunities. In fact, we do so in part of our monthly updates for our investors, is being able to get an inside look at what our projects are. Again, our Victoria Park project's kicking off here in a couple of weeks. So there'll be some unique opportunities for our original investors that believed in our project, a year ago. They'll be able to walk to the side and be like, whoa, this is what I invested in. And so be able to have those unique opportunities to build multifamily here. So I'm always, onboarding new folks, building new relationships. So feel free to reach out. Any questions? Questions?
Or we can do Q&A together.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Great presentation. Wrong way, man. You good, Brandon? We sitting there for you? Are we sitting there for you? Are we sitting here for you? All right. All right. Right out.
So, before we get started with the Q&A, can we give Jaime a big round of applause again? That's a great presentation. So like, I was in my bedroom last week, and I was thinking about it, and I was thinking, why is Jaime more interested in new development rather than acquisitions? Can you talk about why is it more interesting to you, and or is it more advantageous to get into new construction instead of acquisition?
Right. Yeah. So I've done a combination of both. Right. You're talking about kind of value add strategy,
Yes, yeah.
Multifamily. I've invested as an LP passively before, and then also actively. For me, what brings me my greatest kind of fulfillment, what ignites the fire for me is always been development. It's always been able to take projects from beginning to end and execute on that vision. Mm-hmm. And so it's like yes, multifamily, yes, I do that because it builds wealth, it creates cash flow, it creates great unique opportunities. And I continue to do those, but really where I feel kind of the most like passion and being able to create what I ultimately want to do is in the development space, because now I'm actually creating a full vision of the project from beginning, right? There's literally nothing there before, right? It's zero. It's just an idea, right? And so now you're transforming that idea into reality. And so versus an existing building that's already there.
So would you consider yourself more of a businessman, or would you consider yourself more of a creative, more of an artist type of personality?
No, it's actually both. It's actually both. Yeah, that's why it's called the art of development, because it's combining analysis, right? I have I did engineering, I did finance, and so being able to understand numbers really well is very helpful. But the creative part of it has to deal with figuring out what's the most creative things to put on this project, what materials are we going to use, how's the space going to be inviting, a lot of those intangibles that deal with the project, and ultimately what's going to sell or rent comes from the art part of it, not the analysis, right?
Which one do you enjoy more though?
I'd say, I enjoy both parts of it, but if I were to say something, probably just I'd say the art, yeah, the art, yeah.
The creativity, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Right on. You know what I mean? Another question? All right, sure. So being a real estate development, who is your biggest role model, or was, or is, why, and what lessons or takeaways you took from that person?
Yeah, no, I actually, for a long time, I've always had this understanding of what a developer is and things like that. When I did the Cañada Flinders Town Center, we were working for a private person, and I was like, someone's paying for all this? Like, who's building this project? And it was a developer, right? And so that's when I started this idea. I was like, again, I didn't know anything. And so I just like construction. All right, here I'm doing my responsibilities of just managing, some paperwork or whatever. But it was at the end of the day, someone's paying for the checks for all this work. And so I didn't realize that was the next step. And so for me, once I got into like development space, it kind of got into rabbit hole, and it's like, well, who's building this project? Who owns this building, or who developed this building, or whatever, And then a lot of the stuff when I went to business school, for me, it was always Rick Caruso, actually.
Oh, right.
Rick Caruso. Yeah. So, because he comes from like a very similar background. He's like second generation, Italian, raised in, his parents were raised in Boyle Heights.
Yep.
And so,
I didn't know that.
yeah, and then he started as an attorney, kind of started the corporate path too, as well.
Right.
Was an attorney. And then I decided, like, man, I want to do something else. And he ended up getting into development. And so I understood his story. And now he's a billionaire here in LA. And so now he's the, you guys don't know Rick Caruso. He owns the Americana. He owns the Grove. He owns 8500 Boulevard. He owns a couple more. Yeah. He ran for mayor too. I knew him before mayor. So it was just building these big, massive projects that, again, it's creating space for people. Right. And I learned a lot about that when I was in business school. It was a legal class, and how he had to stand up against the Glendale Mall, because the Glendale Mall was trying to stop his project, the Americana, right? And so it went to court and stuff like that, and he showed up in front of court, whereas this other thing was an entity, right? And then people are like, well, what are they trying to push this guy down? Just trying to build a project. And so that's the role of developers, to defend your idea.
And then also, you were talking about risk, and you were talking about risk in the development space. Can you go into more detail, like, what is the biggest risk when it comes to development? And how do you mitigate that?
Yeah, so for us, it's always been understanding the analysis of the markets we're going into. And so a lot of this stuff that we talk about, the market and the economy and rates and all this other stuff, like, yes, a lot of that is important, but the fundamentals of real estate and investing and development have always stayed true for all the cycles that we've gone through. And for us, it's always sticking to markets that are very strong, markets that are always growing, where there's always a big supply of buyers and renters, right? And so the fundamentals are always there to de-risk the level of what you're taking on the project, right? I'm not talking about, the projects that I'm building aren't like, hey, I have this idea to build, I don't know, an industrial facility in the middle of nowhere, right? Or, that for me, it's just like, that's way too much risk. I can't even understand whether that's going to be successful or not. But the stuff we're working on, there's a huge demand for it that it mitigates the risk. And so for me, it's regardless of what's going on in the economy, I know there's always a need for it. And so, plus at the end of the day, you can't just sit there and do nothing. You gotta be active and pursue opportunities. So,
Far as the equity, how the equity raised, how the structure? Is it like a syndication? Or is it a joint venture, a multifamily, a syndication with multiple investors, or a joint venture would be a few investors? How's it done on the development side?
So depending on the size, because we're doing these smaller projects, right, 4 to 6 units small, we raise syndication. We do it through syndication.
Okay.
And so we bring in investors. We do 506B, which, you guys know what that means. Sophisticated investors come into the deal and they come in with as low as 25K. So it allows the average person who has, a little bit of money saved up to come in on a deal and earn the type of returns that we just showed on these types of things. So syndication is a very common model we use. We do use some joint ventures, but very rarely. That depends on if the investor really wants to take the majority of the equity.
Okay.
And for the larger projects, usually bring on bigger fish to do those. And so for that student housing project, you hire like JLL or some of these marketing firms to go out and find the equity, and these firms out of Texas or whatever come in with the equity on this deal. So it could be as simple as that, or you're convincing every 25K person to invest in your deal. So
right. Like you said, be a syndication or a joint venture, depending on how big the project is.
Right, exactly.
Okay, exactly. With James.
Here's a question, which is, what was the biggest failure in your career? Now, how did you go from that, and what was your biggest takeaway?
Failure. I mean, there's been a lot of failures.
Yeah, but what was the biggest one that
I mean, there's always moments on all of them, but I think, we've always had to deal with economic kind of headwinds. That's the only thing we can't control is the market, right? Yeah. And so it actually happened in our first flip. It was a craftsman home, HPOZ. So we said that means historic preservation overlay zone. Means you have to deal with a historic board in order to get your project approved. So we're just going in there, right? Like, all right, let's do a project, whatever. But historic, a flip, adding addition, and like as your first one, right? It was a lot of headache. And so we were trying to sell that project, and it didn't sell. So and then I was also like on a mean street. So a lot of these learnings came from those failures. And so like, yeah, we're just gonna exit like everybody else. But that was not the case. So you just gotta. I wouldn't say there was ever a failure where I lost a ton of money or anything like that. It was just a lot of learning and then pivoting and then figuring out what the best next step is.
Right on. With a few tips around mindset, man, for real estate development. I know with anything, you have the right mindset. Yeah, not every day is a good, beautiful day.
No.
Down, you have to keep pushing forward and knowing that you really want this more than anything.
Correct. So yeah, no, I always do a lot of mindset work because it is a lot of headaches, a lot of work to kind of get through the day in terms of like I enjoy what I do, but it does require a level of discipline to be able to get these projects through. And so whether it's a podcast or an audio or something, right, that kind of keeps me going in terms of this is at the end of the day, these projects getting built, something worthwhile is coming, something that's going to last longer than I am.
Right.
And so that's where a lot of that benefit comes.
How important is mentorship in
It's extremely important, extremely important. Yeah, exactly. So I've had mentors along my journey. Even when I was a 19-year-old kid getting into the construction industry, you know, my mentor was my project manager, and he taught me all about kind of construction and, you know, this is the way, you know, this gets built and that is how you read plans. The first time I saw plans, I was like, whoa, how do you read this stuff, you know? And so it's always been kind of an evolution to understand kind of the next step of that journey. And so I'd say I've always had different mentors along the process to guide me to kind of where I am now. And even now, right, pushing the envelope to even bigger and bigger projects. And so taking on larger and larger deals as I continue this spring.
How did you find your mentors?
I think they just happen naturally, and I think most of the time they should happen naturally. I think it comes from associating yourself, coming to these events, going to putting yourself in the fire of opportunities. And so I think it's just one of those things where it just happens naturally, whether it's at work or a networking event or something that's related to the business that you're trying to ultimately achieve. That's where those relationships end up happening. So business partners end up happening, there's here, investors, things like that. It comes from just seeing you over and over again and see who you are.
Good, man. You got it. No, I have a few questions. That was it. Yeah, our audience, y'all have a question?
Yeah, I saw a couple questions. Yeah, I saw this guy.
At this point in your career, do you invest your own money in deals, or does that vary by a specific deal?
It varies by specific deal. Very little of it, you know, it's just obviously I have to have enough funds to like tie down the side for my ED, put some money to get the architects going, get things kind of off the ground. But then once the vision is realized and we know what we're doing, like then that becomes fundraising mode. We never invite any investors or any lenders to come into the deal until like I give 100% buy-in on the deal. Like if I'm 100% bought in and I believe in the deal, then and they sense that, right? They sense that, hey, this guy really wants to get this project built. That's when I invite people, and that's when I can recuperate a lot of the money that's been put in, so that I can focus on the next opportunity. Yes.
Yeah, how often, I know you said you guys are only doing stuff like by right, but when it comes to like entitlements, how often do politics play a role in that?
A lot. A lot. There's a lot of backroom deals, but this is when I was working in corporate development. But I'd say when it comes to kind of politics, when you're trying to get some of these projects approved, it has to do with kind of just understanding the stakeholders involved. And so even on some of our current deals, you know, people know that it's for sale or something, and a neighbor knows that, you know, something's going to happen to it. And automatically they're like, no, development, no, my house, my view, whatever, right? And so they automatically, you know, get their defenses up. The way you just calm the situation is you just talk to them and tell them, hey, this is what we're thinking, what we're doing, getting kind of some rapport with that. And so that applies to not just neighbors, that applies to going to the neighborhood council meeting. And so just knowing that you're someone who's on the side of providing a great project. I gave you that example of Rick Caruso, right? He showed up to defend his project. And that's what you got to do, is you got to show up and believe in the project, and what you're ultimately trying to do is benefits the community. And that's how you get a lot of buy-in from stakeholders.
How old are you, Jaime?
37 now.
So I have a two-part question for you.
Sure.
What would the 37-year-old self tell your 20-year-old self? And then part B is, what would your 50-year-old self tell you right now?
20-year-old self. I guess when I was younger, I always wanted to like really grow really fast, you know, just like I wanted to just kind of really take on bigger projects, very ambitious, but like maybe just say be patient. Stuff takes time, right? And so like I said, the track record components were important. No one's gonna believe in you unless you've done it a few times, or at least gotten to a level where you're ready to break into bigger projects. And so just kind of be more patient. And so that's what I would say for that. 50-year-old, enjoy the journey, I guess.
Right.
Someone, did you have a question?
Yeah, Jaime, I wanted to ask you about the project flow. Is it more now that you have more of that track record, or is it was more at the beginning? It's
No,
like-
as you get more experience, people get to know you, and you're more in space, right? There's a ton of opportunities that always come my way. So I feel like there's more now, even in the current economy, current economic situations. There are always great deals to be found, but that's why I always tell a lot of people, a lot of investors, right? You can't be sitting in the sidelines because when things, the faucet opens, right? Those deals are coming to people who are more experienced because they're the ones who've been executing the entire time. And so that's why as I continue my progress, I find myself in better and better deals because now a lot of the filtering has already happened and the better opportunities are coming around.
You say like yes to run multiple projects at the same time, or you just try to focus on one?
Only as much as I can handle. I usually like when I'm 100% in, I try to be 100% in on the phase, right? Going back to like the timeline, that due diligence is super important because you got to understand what exactly is going to go into the project, put together your budget, your pro forma, analyze the market. Like I'm 100% committed to understanding this project works. And once it's green light, right, it just moves to the next phase. And then you can work on another project. But that should take 100% of your attention.
Thanks.
You had a question back there?
Yeah, with the commercial space changing and lending changing, what do you anticipate your exit multiples being down the road and your timeframes, I guess, for projects?
Yeah, so again, that example, when I did that flip, I thought we were just gonna hit it out of the park to start, right? Didn't know much better in terms of what the market can do to you. But when it comes to us, that's why when we take on these bigger deals, they need to have a good spread, right? 6-7 figure spread in order for them to be worth it. And so even if there's corrections and we have to sell, there's always some spread left for us to walk away with. And then if not, right, say it's like a massive, downturn for whatever reason, right? Again, going back to fundamentals, there's a massive shortage of housing supply. Rents have never gone down since COVID. They've only gone up. Yeah. And so there's not enough housing. And so my backup scenarios are still good, and renting it out, stabilizing it, taking out whatever loan I had before and then holding on to a better market condition. So it's always about thinking about multiple exit strategies. You always go for the home run, but then you always have a couple contingencies in place. But that always goes down to fundamentals to begin with.
Shoot, Matt, do you have any questions on Zoom?
No questions on Zoom. Zoom, do you have any questions? I can see talking amongst themselves.
Gabriel, one thought is, one question is, what are your thoughts on custom home building for single family?
Generally, yes. If you're really good at the art part of it, right? At the end of the day, there's an end user. There's one specific end user that's going to want to buy it for whatever reason. Then it makes a lot of sense, right? The spreads could be insane, right? For these luxury builders that do call what's called spec homes, right? They speculate that it's gonna be sold at a massive margin. But for me, that's never been my space because that's too risky for me. Like that's a huge amount of risk to assume that there's going to be an end buyer, a millionaire or billionaire that's going to come in and just buy this massive project. It's going to take me tens of millions to build. Like I'm not willing to take that risk, nor am I willing to let my investors take that risk.
No.
Sure.
A lot of questions. How do you see AI playing a role in the whole development space?
Probably just maybe expedite certain processes, but development is very management intensive, very people intensive. So managing architects, things like that, and the city. unless the city implements AI, I don't know if they ever will. You gotta deal with them. And so those are the ones holding up your projects. So those are the ones who approve your projects. So I think it's gonna be a very slow process. Because at the end of the day, it's still a very people-driven process to get your projects approved.
Do you think it would like replace architects or something?
I don't know if it can, just because it still requires understanding of what the space can look like, and the level of creativity, and that's why there's world-renowned architects that build some of these world-renowned projects. I mean, that just requires a different level of creativity, so I don't know.
Any more questions? Now we'll wrap it up. Any more questions? And the room? None? All right, good. Have me round of applause. Thank you. Thank you for your stick around.
Yeah, exactly.
We'll give away a few items real quick.
Oh, actually, I do have an announcement.
Go ahead. Talk
I have an announcement. This tomorrow and Friday is a conference in downtown LA, Re-Amplify 2.0. And I was given 4 tickets for free, general admission. You just, I guess the first 4 that either text this number will get the tickets. Give me a second. Where is this? Where's this number? Here we go. You gotta text your name, email, and phone. Here we go. 562 455 7154. 562-455-7154. Your name, email, and phone, and you get a free general admission to Re-Amplify 2.0. A lot of us are going to be there tomorrow and Friday at the USC building in downtown LA.
Okay.
Big networking conference.
Thank you, Jaime.
I got a few little announcements before we network again. One of them is Jason and I were looking for a potential partner to help us continue growing our meetups, someone that has marketing and promoting talents. If that's you, please feel free to reach out to Jason and I and see if we can come together collectively and continue growing these meetups. Once again, go ahead, Jason, you got something to say?
Yeah, how did it benefit them better?
Good question, Jason. How does it benefit you to get your name and your brand out in front of the audience? Also, Multifamily Masters has a network with over 12,000 people that you can network within a meetup group and continue marketing your business and whatever endeavors you have going on, and just be a face up here with Jason and I with your business and your brand. Good question, Jason.
Yeah.
Once again, if that fits you or you know someone that may be interested in doing it, please feel free to reach out to me or Jason.
Yeah.
Dexter, any specifics on what you need in marketing? Is like
just to continue helping. Good question. Just to continue growing our meetup. We have a goal to try to fill this room up, you know, in the next room also, and have a nice. So say it again, brother.
100 people.
100 plus people are going to be one of our goals, right? And we having a nice crowd, nice registration on meetup.com, but sometimes it's best to go with numbers. So that's the goal, to work with someone to market and have promoting skills. Good question. All right. I have something I want to give away. I'll see who was paying attention. All right. This is a daily journal from Multifamily Masters. Ask them a question about your presentation, man. Oh, that's my wife back there. Good question. My wife back there. All right, secret part. Let me see what you got. I had one too regarding, it was, what is the square footage of R3? R3.
800.
No, I heard it. 800. There you go. Good job. Yep, that's right? The square foot of my wife Adro back here signing people in, appreciate the support.
So they said, before you give away that book, you got to tell them why that book is so special, what's the biggest secret in the book, bro?
The Rich Man in Babylon. Actually, I haven't read. I just do it on YouTube. But the biggest takeaway on how to save your money and make it work for you.
Yeah.
Every $10 you get, put one away and keep on building up that nest egg to invest in something else. Also, watch out who you invest in. Before he invested with the right people, he made a few wrong investments and lost his money. My biggest takeaway. Now, the question is, what's the difference between hard cost and soft cost? We can get it. Gabriel, you're asking a whole lot of questions. You might know.
Hard cost is what stays on the property, and soft costs are the architectural fees and stuff that involves getting everything developed and permitted and approved.
Sound right, Bert? Yes. You could have told me anything like, okay, yeah.
Hey, man.
To make the successor, be able to say thank you to all of our volunteers and direct. Before we do that, I just want to make a very quick announcement, you guys. Jaime was talking about the importance of a mentorship program. We're actually offering a mentorship program 6 months. I chose this mentorship program, which led me to becoming a general partner in a 106 unit property. So, if you guys are interested in learning more, please feel free to reach out to me. All right.
Again, thank you to our volunteers. Thank you, opportunity.